3, 2, 1. All right, number 3. We already can see that this one's a little bit weird because we have a variable on both sides, okay? Now, you still want to kind of follow the steps. You want to make sure that your radical is isolated on one side of the equation, and it already is. So we'll start off by squaring both sides. And now you have to make sure you followed what you just did. You just squared x, so that's going to be an x squared. And when you square a radical, you're just left with what's underneath, so negative 2x plus 35. All right, so we all know that math builds. So we don't have a linear equation anymore. Now we have a quadratic equation that we just learned in the previous chapter, multiple ways on how to solve a quadratic equation. So if you remember, in order to solve a quadratic equation, we've got to set the equation equal to 0. So I'm going to start by taking my negative 2x and adding it to the other side. And subtracting my positive 35 so that it becomes a negative 35. We have multiple ways that we could solve this. We could solve it by graphing and checking for the x-intercepts. We could solve by factoring. We could solve by the quadratic formula. We could solve by completing the square. To me, when I see it, I think the easiest thing to do is to factor, all right? So I'm going to think what multiplies to give me negative 35 and adds to give me positive 2. Well, that's going to be a positive 7 and a negative 5. So hopefully our warm-ups from Monday and Tuesday help you. And you know that in order to solve this, we have to set our factors equal to 0 and solve for x. So one of my solutions is x equals negative 7. And one of my solutions is x equals 5. Okay? So let's check both of these and see if one of them gives us an extraneous solution. So I'm going to pull out my calculator. And when I plug this in for x equals negative 7, I should get a solution of negative 7. So I'll type it in as the square root of negative 2 times negative 7 plus 35, all underneath the radical. So let's try it. Square root of negative 2 times negative 7 plus 35. Whoa. Okay. And we get 7. Is negative 7 the same thing as positive 7? It's not. So we can go ahead and say that x equals negative 7 is an extraneous solution. So when I report my answers here at the end, I'm not going to include negative 7. Let's see if 5 works. So when I type it in, it should equal 5. I think that's a negative 2. So here we go. Square root of negative 2 times 5 plus 35. And we get 5 equaling 5, which is true. So my only solution for this problem is x equals 5. Okay, so the reason why this doesn't work all comes from your first step when you have to square both sides. Okay, so let's just take an original equation, x equals 3. So from the get-go, we know that x is 3. Now, when I go to square both sides, which is definitely doable because I'm balanced, because I'm doing it to the left and the right-hand side of the equation, I get x squared equals 9. So I've created this new equation, x squared equal 9, and when you solve for x, What happens when you take the square root set equal to a variable? Yeah, you get plus or minus 3. So your apparent solutions are positive and negative 3, but at the beginning, what was the only solution of x? 3. Okay, so the solution that we get but what doesn't actually work into the original equation is called the extraneous solution.